Thijs, who is he was a Danish chef. He's training you on the section. He goes on holiday in a week. You've got a week to get this down.
Enjoy.
And I remember eating the sound of the sea, and I burst into tears. And I remember eating the dish. I remember the sommelier, Melania, she came up to the table and poured me some sake, which is what they paired with the dish. It worked amazingly well. And I remember I just had tears streaming down my face. I think at one point we worked out it's 1,200 plates in the service.
Oh my God.
And obviously all those plates need to go through. I mean, the pass was probably about 1.5 meters long.
JKP Podcast. And on the show today, we have the chef de cuisine from Dinner by Heston Blumenthal at Atlantis the Royal, Tom Allen. Tom, welcome to the show.
Good morning, James. Thank you very much for inviting us along.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So, first things first, Chief. First ever or favourite food memory as a child?
I would say, I have to say, I think I was 3 years old. We were in Torquay with my mum and dad and my older sister. And my parents didn't have much money. We went on holiday, and I remember being in the harbour. Obviously, I was 3 years old. I don't remember a great deal about it. But what I do remember is my parents ordered a jacket potato from one of those little stands that people have on the side of the seafront. I think we had baked beans and cheese on it and butter. And I remember the flavour and I remember the smell. I remember where we were sat it just smelt like jacket potato. Like jacket potato that's in the oven and roasted in the oven, baked in the oven, should I say? Not the cheap ones that my mum used to do in the microwave and then finish them in the oven. But you smell the skin. And as I say, 3 years old, I don't really remember a great deal of what was going on, but that connection with the smell, and I think being with my mum and dad, feeling safe and loved, but just being there, and I remember the boats and the lights and there was lots of music. But so I'd say jacket potato.
Yeah, so Torquay is a beautiful place to go on vacation in England if people don't know it, and also seaside town.
Yeah,
really beautiful, lots of crazy seagulls everywhere.
Yeah,
but so jacket potato is a nice one. It's the first we've ever had on the show, I have to say. So then, growing up, what were the types of food that you had? Were you a fussy kid, or did you eat anything?
No, I wasn't particularly fussy. I think I would say my mum, she was a stay-at-home mum, which is a full-time job. As I'm a parent now, and when you hear people say full-time, stay-at-home mum, it's a full-time job. So she used to do a lot of home cooking. My dad used to grow a lot of vegetables in the garden. He had an allotment, and they moved and got a larger garden. He used to grow. He was always potting in the garden, and I think that was quite normal for that generation. Grew lots of fruit and vegetables. So we always had that connection with food and nature. And then I think as a child, the smells, the home cooking. Mum used to cook a lot. She would do lots of baking with us, and I think just kind of have that respect for food. You grow vegetables, and you see it kind of go from a seed to a plant to a vegetable or a fruit appearing.
So were you involved a lot with when your father was doing the
he would
as
we'd go out, you'd do a little bit of the fun things, and then get bored, and then go in and get on the Nintendo. But yeah, I was, and then obviously kind of harvesting, picking, and digging, and then preparing and cooking. So it when I look back on it, I didn't realize it at the time, but I think that was it was quite instrumental to kind of ingraining that in us as children.
That's fantastic at such a young age.
Yeah,
that you were privy to to all of those experiences.
And I think as an adult and a parent, I look back on it as well, and I think I appreciate it, and I respect what they were doing. I think they were doing it because that was probably what they were shown, and I think it doesn't happen so much these days. I think it's you know,
It's quite rare.
We're in a slightly different,
It's
slightly
quite
different
rare.
era, but really important.
So then, during your sort of early teenage or years, when was your first sort of foray into going into professional kitchen? Did you always want to be a chef, or what was the thing that led you to go into the kitchen?
Do you know? I don't think it was. I always wanted to be a chef. I always had a really kind of deep connection with food. And food was always about getting the family together and sitting down and kind of having a chat, downloading the day and talking different things. But I think obviously my mum worked in a little bit part time in the industry, and I think I kind of got drawn into it that way, and then just started cooking. Went to college, and then got a job in a small restaurant in Cheltenham, which is my hometown in the Cotswolds, called Lumiere. And then I think connected with it was a husband and wife restaurateurs. He was from Canada, she was from UK, and travelled, and it was almost like a second family. It was very small. It was two in the kitchen, two in the front of house, and I think at that age, I think I was 19, 20, and I think it was a very impressionable age, and I think learning about life and how to deal with certain situations, the world, learning about the world and travel and food, and I think it just went from there, and then evolved on to having a connection and meeting Ashley Palmer Watts, and then obviously Heston to the Fat Duck, and I've spent a long time at the Fat Duck.
So before we get to Heston, Ashley, and the Fat Duck, when you were at college, I want to just understand from your point of view, did you have a different path, as in, did you want to do something else, or was it straight into catering college?
I went straight into catering college. I was, I kind of stood out to I think my lecturers from my other class members, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like an extension of school. I think college has evolved a lot since then as well. When I look back on it, I think it was quite a rundown college. And obviously I went to college thinking I was doing the right thing by getting qualifications, and I don't regret anything in life, but I don't regret my college years. But when I look back on, I think how college has evolved in the last 20 years, I think it's amazing how it's evolved, and I think it's more along the lines of what you'd expect from going to college. But it got me to, it's all part of the journey.
Yeah,
it got me to where I am now.
So then from college, you worked at Lumiere, which is this really beautiful restaurant, 1-star now.
It is 1-star now,
It has 1-star. Yeah. So tell me about those experiences, because that must have also been quite an eye-opener for you.
It was. It was 32 cover restaurant, 2 in the kitchen, 2 in the front of house, and it was only open for dinner. And Jeff Chapman, who was the chef patron, he was almost like a second dad / big brother, more a big brother. And we used to have lots of fun. We used to mess around quite a lot, and we would take the mick out of everyone that walked through the kitchen door and have a bit of banter. And we would just cook honest food. It was tasty. It was just really hearty food. And I think that was my early years of learning how to put flavors together and working with quite unique ingredients. And then going from there. So 4 years. 4 years.
So because also Cheltenham's quite or that sort of part of England is quite a foodie sort of area. At the same time, if I remember correctly, you also had a 2-star, Le Champignon Sauvage,
David.
with David, who was also a legend and is a legend in the industry.
Yeah.
So you must have learned quite a substantial amount in those 4 years.
Absolutely, I did. And obviously the connection with working at Lumiere was through Ashley Palmer Watts, who's a great friend of mine. And he worked for Lynn and Jeff in their previous restaurant in Dorset. So that was, I connected with Lynn and Jeff, and then obviously connected with Ashley, and that was my route to the Fat Duck. So I used to hear a lot. Ashley, I think, was kind of their equivalent of me in their previous restaurant. So I used to hear a lot about the Fat Duck and what they were doing in the early years. And I remember, thinking that sounds pretty interesting. And I'd like to go see what that's about.
So then, when did you take the leap to actually go into the Fat Duck?
So I took the leap to the Fat Duck. It was February the 1st, 2005.
Okay.
So a long time ago. So I spent 4 years at Lumiere, and then got them through the busy period, festive period, and then I went up to the Fat Duck, and I did my trial. I had a week kind of trial, and it was
unpaid, right? Unpaid.
It was. Do you know what? It was actually paid.
It was paid?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, it was right. This is your section. Tice, who is he was a Danish chef, he's training you on the section. He goes on holiday in a week. You've got a week to get this down.
Enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously I'd gone from a little 32 cover restaurant, kind of having, it was quite relaxed, but open for dinner, to I think the Fat Duck the previous year had received 3 Michelin stars.
Yes.
A couple of months after I started, it was voted #1 in the world in the
yes.
top 50 San Pellegrino. So it was like,
which was monstrous.
it was monstrous. I didn't really know what hit me, to be honest with you. Lunch and dinner, full restaurant, 42 covers for lunch, 42 covers for dinner, 3 menus.
5 days a week?
6 days a week.
6 days a week, okay.
6 days a week. But you get 2 days off. 2 days off, and then 5 days working. And I remember it was pretty intense. I think I lost a couple of kilos in the first couple of weeks. And obviously moving away from home, it was really tough. Being away from my girlfriend, and it was literally sink or swim.
Okay.
An amazing team of people. To work at a 3 Michelin star level.
So I was going to say, I mean, like, look, at the time, Lumiere, incredible, beautiful restaurant. But to go from that sort of homely comfort,
safe,
fantastic food
Yep.
with your big brother, family around, to then go into essentially the #1 best restaurant in the world at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, that must have just been such a huge culture shock for you.
It was massive. It just, not only lunch, dinner, but just the level, the attention to detail.
And the thought process then as
Absolutely.
well, because they were just constantly pushing and pushing and pushing all the time.
Absolutely, they were. And I when I think about it, you look back and you see high performing sports teams, at their peak, and you have an amazing team of players, and they learn to play together and do amazing things. It was the same back then in the kitchen with the team that we had at that time. Heston was in the kitchen on the path daily, had a real presence, an amazing person, but he had a presence in the kitchen, and you wanted to perform every day at the highest level and not make mistakes. You make mistakes, and
of course,
as we're human beings, we
but
do.
How could you not in a place like that? So look, when you first arrived, then, so let's set the scene. You're not only in the Fat Duck in Bray. Bray also has another 3-star Michelin restaurant.
It does, yeah, the waterside.
The waterside. So for a little village, it's really incredible, because this is the place where everybody goes to eat. So then, as a chef, how many kitchens did the Fat Duck have at that time? Because you have the main sort of kitchen where you do the service, right?
Yep.
Did they have the development kitchen at that time?
It was being formed when I arrived. So when I arrived, it was a very tiny kitchen. It probably surface area wasn't a great deal bigger than the room we're sitting in now.
Right.
A very awkward shape. It's obviously a grade 2 listed building. So you didn't build a kitchen. You put it in the space and fitted the kitchen into that space.
Hope for the best.
So it wasn't overly efficient.
Right.
But when I look back on what we were achieving as a team, how many plates left the pass, how little space you had, we used to have, I think it was 8 or 9 garden sheds lined up in a row in the cottage garden at the back.
And that was for what?
That was for fridges, freezers, vac pack machine, dry stalls, linen room. We had I think it was shed 8 or shed 9. It was slightly bigger shed. That was our changing room. I remember in the winter getting changed in there. It was pretty.
God.
And then it was, we'd put an electric fan in there, and that was luxury, having an electric fan in the shed. But obviously, I think when you look back on it now, from a health and safety point of view, that probably wouldn't go down particularly well.
Right.
And it's very different now. But back then, I think that was part of the charm, that you had this restaurant pushing the boundaries and doing amazing things.
So how big was the brigade at that time then?
I think the brigade. I remember looking back on. We used to do Secret Santa every year with Heston,
Right.
And we would it was amazing. We'd shut for 2 weeks. We would do Christmas Eve service, or no, a couple of days before Christmas Eve. We'd do service, we'd do lunch service, and we'd literally deep clean, shut down. And we would go on holiday for like 2.5 weeks over Christmas and New Year, which was unheard of.
Incredible.
So we kind of worked through a busy December to get to that. Well, every month was month was like December, to be honest with you. But we'd work through, and we would close, and to have that time to go back and recharge and go on some travels and see your family was phenomenal. And then we would do Secret Santa in the Heinz Head. He obviously took over the Heinz Head in 2005. So we'd go into the Vicar's room, and I remember every year that I was there, we'd get more and more in the team, and eventually we grew out the Vicar's room. We had to go to the top floor, and we'd do Secret Santa, and Heston would give us all a nice present, a personalised present, and Secret Santa was quite inappropriate back then as well. Probably couldn't talk about some of the things that were presented. But it was just that real togetherness, and that it sounds really cliche, but family. It was like a cult. It was like a family cult. It was incredible.
But do you know what? I'm not surprised, because I remember back then, Heston literally just exploded. Compared to the rest of the chefs that were in the scene.
Yep.
His level of thinking, the detail on the plates, the molecular gastronomy part of things, it was just another 2 or 3 levels.
Yep.
And the fact that year, as you said, #1 best restaurant in the world, it really put him in the limelight. And I remember he was constantly on TV, the way he was thinking, like, it was just phenomenal.
It was next level. And when I look back on those early dishes, that when I first started at the Fat Duck in 2005, 2006, 2007, for me, those dishes, obviously they have a real place in my heart, but they were so far ahead of their time. I think they'd be pretty relevant now, which they are. They bring old dishes back, and
so much tableside preparation, like bacon and eggs ice cream, and snail
I remember
porridge,
when he came up with that
Sound
idea.
of the Sea, these incredible dishes.
Sound of the Sea, I remember, was a dish. I remember when we first started at the Fat Duck, he told everyone to come in and eat and experience it, which I'd never experienced before, and I thought was brilliant. So you truly understand why you're doing what you do, and to the level of the detail. And I remember I was with my wife, eating Sound of the Sea, girlfriend at the time, Sound of the Sea, and we just put it on. Obviously, it was pretty out there dish. You had the shell, you had this plate of food that had edible sand and different seafood on there, and different herbs, sea veg. I remember eating it, and I had to stop eating it because it made me gag. The crunching of the sand, and listening to what was going on. And as you talked about when we were talking about the jacket potato memory earlier, the seagulls flying around in the harbour, I remember thinking, I've got to stop eating this. And I kind of pushed it around the plate, and it hadn't long been on the menu. And I remember eating it a few years later, after it had been refined slightly. It was just before the Fat Duck migrated to Melbourne for a period of time, when they then regenerated the Fat Duck and refurbished it. I remember eating it thinking, actually, that's really delicious. And I get that a lot more than when I ate it previously, when I had to stop eating it. And then when they came back from Melbourne, I remember had lunch with my wife, and we stayed in Bray in one of the little cottages. And I remember eating the Sound of the Sea, and I burst into tears. And I remember eating the dish. I remember the sommelier, Melania, she came up to the table and poured me some sake, which is what they paired with the dish. It worked amazingly well. And I remember I just had tears streaming down my face. And my wife, bless her, she held my hand and kind of looked at me and bit her bottom lip. And I remember the emotions that dish brought to me it was incredible. And that's the first time that's ever happened with a dish. And I was thinking about being in Torquay as a child, walking on the beach, going to get popcorn in a little rubber dinghy. I remember being on the beach with my girlfriend at the time in Greece in our early years, and then more kind of recently being on the beach with my wife and daughters and my parents, and just having that feeling of being content and nostalgia, and it's just powerful, and the emotions that it evoked. And we've had people in the restaurant that when I go out to the table, speak with them, that they're in tears, and to be able to connect with people through food in that way, I think is so powerful.
That's the thing, is that when you even have his first book, Heston's first book,
yeah,
You open it and it's like an encyclopedia, and in the middle of the book, it's this huge drawing of Heston's head.
Yep.
And inside is all the flavor memories and
Yep.
components. And I just think like everyone is locked onto that at some point somehow, and that's
Yep.
how we all connect. And I agree, because it is such a powerful thing to connect with someone through food. But those dishes are, I mean, when I was working for, I think, Philip Howard at the time at the Square in Mayfair, 2-star. And the food was phenomenal at the Square.
He's a legend.
He's absolutely,
Yep.
he's incredible. But then when Heston is doing all this kind of stuff, and you're talking about gels and spherification and foams, I mean, it was phenomenal. Now, I just want to ask you, how many, during at the height of your time at the Fat Duck, how many dishes were on the menu, on the tasting menu?
I think the most it ever got to, and when we say dishes, it could be, you know, the little palate cleanser,
Yes,
the little
yes,
nitro.
yes.
I think
Even the whiskies, right?
the whiskey wine comes.
Yeah.
I think at one point it got to 21. I think
Okay.
normally it was around 19.
Right. And so you had how many covers, if you remind me?
40. It started it was 48, and then as he went on and his profile grew, and I think we remapped the restaurants that it's at 42, and I think that was so that we weren't, you know, encroaching on people's dining experience. And
Yeah.
obviously, you said the OS&E, the you know the table side, you know, dining. I think to get the trolleys through the restaurant properly and the sweet shop.
Because that's a huge amount of courses. If you have 42 covers and basically 21 courses.
I think, yeah, as I said earlier with the kitchen, I think at one point we worked out it's 1,200 plates in the service.
Oh my God.
And obviously all those plates need to go through. I mean, the pass was probably about 1.5 meters long. And people used to come up. It was really lovely. People used to come up to the kitchen and look in the kitchen and be like, have you got another kitchen? We said, no, this is the kitchen. And it's almost like we're like in this little box, and people would look like when you're at the zoo and people looking and like, hi, and you're doing a great job. Thanks very much. It was pretty full on, and lots of bending and being as efficient as you can. And you know, if you, I remember used to try and, you know, obviously to get to the walk-in fridge and the freezer, so that it was a fridge that went into a freezer. So you had to go through pastry. So you obviously finish in service, you clean down, you then start prepping, and you're like, oh, my salmon's in the fridge, and then you've got to get through it's like a train carriage, and then you've got jockey there who's in the middle of service, not wanting to let you through. Made it a little bit difficult. So you had to even be organised with what you had in the back of your service fridge, so that you could then start to prep after service while pastry service was still going on.
Wow.
So yeah, it was pretty intense. Then obviously that grew. We had Heston took over the Heinz Head, and I think with that came like an external building, which then became the prep house and then the lab. And obviously at the time reservations and Heston's office, which he wasn't actually in a great deal, and then it kind of got taken over as chocolate room, and just as it grew and the menu kind of developed.
Because it was just incredible, just that whole time. Then when he took over the pub, then it had a Michelin star.
Yeah,
you know. But when Heston was at the Fat Duck on the pass during service, because we all know he's self-taught.
Yeah.
Right. But during that time, 2005, 2007 onwards, how was he on the pass? He because he commanded it well. He knew what he was doing.
He was very sharp. He knew what was going on in the dining room. He was incredible. And we used to have a lot of laugh and a lot of banter, and we used to kind of play jokes on other chefs, and you know, but
as you do,
as you do, and that kind of helps get you through the day. But no, he was phenomenal. He was, you know, how he did what he did, and then as you say, when he started to grow and his profile grew. I remember he went in for back surgery just before Christmas. I think had Christmas with his family, and then as you say, it started to take off, and then we saw less of him daily, and then he would come in for, you know, odd services, and then he'd be there without fail every Sunday, and we used to love working Sunday. And Sunday was a day that you weren't getting bothered from admin and all the office, and he used to come in and he'd stand and prep with us, and we talk about dishes and development and ideas. As you say, that book, And in the Fat Duck Cookbook, when you undo that is his brain. I mean, he's a million miles an hour, and thinking on a level that most people don't achieve. And when you have a conversation with him, I'll call him. We'll have a Teams call, and I have a list of things to go through with him. And half an hour later, we've not talked about anything on the list, and we've talked about quantum physics, and we've talked about black holes, and we've talked about different restaurants and different approaches, and and then you're like, Heston, I need to, before you go, I need to talk to you about these points.
He's like, yeah.
He was amazing.
So then, with your relationship with Ashley Palmer Watts, who at the time was the right hand of Heston, tell me about how you guys started to develop Dinner by Heston Blumenthal.
So Heston, I think Heston kind of conceptualized Dinner a few years before it obviously, they started to work on it. He had a real fascination with British food history. And I think he's very patriotic and very proud to be British.
Because he had this most amazing television show.
He did, in Search of Perfection. And then it went on to the Historical Feast.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was so fascinating to see all these experiences that he was doing. And it was all about the food history in the UK.
Yeah. And obviously, I think back then, setting up kitchens, high-level kitchens at that time, went to setting up development kitchens. And I think when you look at it, trying to be creative and trying to operate a restaurant at the same time is very difficult, especially in a place like the Fat Duck, where space is very limited. So I think to set up a development kitchen and get a group of people who are connected to the restaurant, I think that's really important, that you have chefs developing dishes and food that understand the concept and what they're developing dishes for. I think is really important. So you have that crossover of the operation, and obviously you need to be creative. It's a very different environment to being in a kitchen and having the stress of getting ready for service, and obviously cooking throughout service. It's a very different environment, very different mindset, and it's not easy. To be creative, to come up with the new meat fruit or the new tipsy cake, or you're going to the Fat Duck, Sound of the Sea, or bacon egg ice cream. It's to come up with those dishes where they're kind of one-off dishes, but you've got to continue to keep creating and keep the flow going, and adapting and changing is really important.
So would you say the development of that particular restaurant, food-wise, was 2, 3, 4 years?
It was. So I moved on to work with Ashley with Dinner and Heston, and we had a few people from the Fat Duck that would help out, a few of the chefs. It was probably 2 years before. So in the development kitchen, I remember having tastings with all of the senior members of staff from the Mandarin Oriental would come to Bray. They'd come out of the city, come to this little village, Bray, and we would cook 10 dishes and present it to them, talk to them about the dish. Each dish has a story as well, which is, I think, really important, and that's what Dinner is. So Heston and the team work with, food historians. They work with curators of museums. They work with the British Library. So we would go probably 2 times a year, quite deep into the British Library,
so
the archive.
Extensive.
Yeah, massively so. So you have books. You're presented with books that are from the 13th century, which you literally need to translate. People back then, not many people could write. It was all kind of verbal and phonetically, writing. So recipes were passed down from generation to generation, cooks of households, and then as the centuries went by, people were exploring the world. You'd get ingredients and species of animals that would come back on adventures that weren't indigenous to Great Britain or Britain, and then the food scene would change. You'd have one meal of the day because food wasn't very available. People used to eat very plain, quite simple food, and spices and aromatics were not necessarily there for flavour to enhance the dish, but to mask the flavour of maybe some rotten meat or some vegetables that are past their best. And then people would go into we researched when you would eat your breakfast, you'd have you'd have a snack before lunch, then you'd have lunch, and then you'd have afternoon tea, and then you'd have dinner. So it was when people would evolve to use cutlery rather than a piece of bread and a spoon. So it's looking at multi courses. With our monarchs, kings and queens, they would have large banquets where tables were laid out with literally hundreds of dishes in some cases. So to see that evolving, and then obviously to see how we adapt that to a restaurant. And like I say, it's taking dishes from what we do at dinner. We take dishes from in the past. We apply Heston's thinking, the modern techniques and the cooking techniques that we have, and great supply lines as well. Getting the best ingredients we can.
Wow.
And then to reimagine and recreate dishes that were served in the past and maybe had been forgotten about, and they were in archives somewhere, and bringing those back to life.
So when you first opened, if you cast your mind back, dinner, once I remember sort of 6 months before you guys opened, there was a huge buzz, not just in London, but globally, about this restaurant, Dinner by Heston. He'd done all the TV, so the media was hot.
Yep.
You were in a prime location.
Yeah.
The kitchen is sort of it's in the middle of the room, so all the diners can see all of the chefs, what you're doing. It's a much larger setup than the Fat Duck. I think it was, how many covers? 120? Something like that.
So when we first set up dinner in London, we were doing 170 for dinner.
Okay.
And 130 for lunch.
Right.
We couldn't keep up with.
And that was 7 days a week.
That was
right?
7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Like a factory, just.
It was
so
300 covers a day we were doing.
Wow.
It was a monster.
So when you first opened, to the chefs, the global press, how was the restaurant sort of perceived?
I think it was taken to very well. It was hugely successful, and as you say, I think Heston was, this was his next big venture out of, what was his Fat Duck empire. Obviously, it was spearheaded by Ash. Ash built an amazing team of people to obviously be able to operate the restaurant from the kitchen side and the front of house. But it was phenomenal. As you say, the location, Knightsbridge, within the Mandarin Oriental, opposite Harvey Nichols, Harrods just down the road. It was a really beautiful part of London, Hyde Park. You walk in through a very bustly street, and then you go through the hotel, beautiful hotel, and then you've got this most amazing view of Hyde Park and the Queen's Guards, walking past the restaurant, marching past twice a day for change of guards. A beautiful show kitchen, chefs who were very well turned out, trained, trained very well to be able to operate at that level. And when we set the restaurant up, we weren't expecting the level of success that the restaurant had. I think we knew that it was very different. It was 300 covers a day. We knew that we could serve some tasty food. We'd planned it, a year and a half, 2 years beforehand. Developed all the dishes, written the recipes, all the costings, all the health and safety side of it, and then to go live, it was pretty busy. We gained a Michelin star within our first year of operation, which was amazing. And then in our second year, we were awarded the second Michelin star, which we never thought was possible, and we were never working towards that. We
Especially
just wanted
for the size of the operation, it's so big.
Yeah, it's so dinner. I always say, and I mean this in a respectful way, in a humble way, that it kind of defies the restaurant scene in the sense that you're working at a high level, but you're cooking high numbers as well, high volume as well. So
But it's not easy.
it's not easy.
To
Absolutely
churn
not.
out food which is so meticulous, so thought-provoking, for it to be consistent.
That's it, and that's consistency is the key. If Ashley was there on a Saturday night running the pass, or if I was there, or one of the other sous chefs were there, it had to be the same. And that was, I think, what we were able to do from what we learned at the Fat Duck. Consistency and control. It's very measured, very procedural led. There was a recipe for every single thing that we cooked, whether it was a sauce, a puree. It was weighed to the gram. The salt, the cream, the butter, everything. I remember, in my early days at the Fat Duck, I remember there was kind of, people would say, yeah, pastry is a science. Everything has to be weighed. And I remember Heston was saying, well, if pastry is a science, why shouldn't, making a sauce or making a puree or, making a risotto, why shouldn't that be a science as well in terms of controlling the amounts and the ingredients and the weights and the measures? Obviously, through the year, things change through seasons and variables change, but then you need to, as a chef, you need to control the variables. But so it was very consistent. I think that was what we were able to do very well at dinner, and we do to this day very well at dinner. Is that there's control measures, and we've evolved as in the last 12 years that dinner's been operational. We never stand still. We always we do what we do, but we always look to get better and to improve and become more efficient and adapt. I think as time's gone by as well. I think COVID was a quite a big thing for the world, and I think how we perceive dining, how we have to build the team, how we operate. So it's not about kind of resting on the laurels. It's about trying to keep pushing forward and evolving.
So talking about pushing forward and evolving, of course, dinner was in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And now it's in Dubai.
Yeah.
In one of the most iconic locations in the world.
Yeah.
When was the first sort of thought between yourself, Ashley, and Heston that you would come out here and have a restaurant in this place?
Well, I remember talks of it in probably 2017. I remember hearing talks. And we looked at other locations as well, which weren't quite right. But I remember hearing about Dubai and thinking that sounds exciting. And I think the project Atlantis the Royal, it was a very complicated project. It was, I think, had many kind of opening dates. I think just where the build was so complicated, and then throw in, as we talk about, COVID in the mix as well, which no one saw coming. So yeah, I remember them talking about coming to Dubai, and it's a very exciting city. And then, so I was never supposed to come to Dubai. That obviously came off the back of, just after COVID, we had a team set, and obviously with COVID, we had a team set up. We had a head chef who had been working at dinner for many number of years, started at the Fat Duck as well. And then we had the front of house, the general manager. And neither of those, because of what happened with, staggered start dates and obviously, COVID, neither of those actually came to Dubai. It was actually myself and John White, the current general manager, who we both worked with each other in Dinner London for the last 10 years. And we were trying to build a team. And then I remember from being in Bray, trying to recruit, and I'm thinking, this is going to be impossible to try and externally recruit someone to take this role who has the DNA, the knowledge of Heston, the Fat Duck and dinner. And I remember just thinking, I remember having a conversation with my wife, walking down the Great Windsor Park near Windsor Castle, thinking, we could do this. This could be a really exciting opportunity. So we decided to do it. We had about a 3-month period to kind of finish things up in the UK and rent our house out and sell all of our belongings and say bye to everyone, leave the team in London as set up as they could be. Obviously off the back of COVID, kind of, it was a difficult period for the industry.
Tricky time. Very tricky time.
So dinner is very personal to me. It's so ensuring that the team were fully set for myself and John to exit, and then coming over here, integrating ourselves. Firstly, family. Making sure my family was set is a big priority, with school and just being safe and set. And then obviously getting established in Atlantis, getting established in Dubai, which is a phenomenal place. We've really fallen in love with Dubai. It's a very dynamic city, very fast paced, as I'm sure you know. A very exciting place to be, and I think from what has been achieved here in the past and where it is now, and I think where it's going is very exciting, and we're very proud and very patriotic, and to be British and to be representing Heston at Atlantis the Royal in Dubai, but also we feel very proud to be here in Dubai right now at this time, at this period, and what's going on So yeah, it was a big move, and just to learn, Dubai is a very different place to London, to what Melbourne was, and I think just staying true to what we are and representing the brand, and representing Heston, but also adapting to the market here, and keeping dinner what it is, but also making some changes just so that it's slightly different as well.
But that excuse me, that bloodline of Heston is 100% in that restaurant at Atlantis the Royal, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got the signature dishes,
Yes.
of course, but it has to have, the restaurant itself must have a completely different character per se than what you have in London, right?
It does. It's a very different. Aesthetically, it's very different. As we talked about Hyde Park, we talked about it's in a Victorian property in the Mandarin Oriental, and then you come to Dinner Dubai, which is within Atlantis the Royal, which is a stunning building.
Phenomenal place.
When, I drive out every night and I look up at it, and you have to kind of bend down in my car to look up, and it's lit up and it's beautiful. On the Palm, which is iconic. You walk into the restaurant. It's a very different feel, but you're in a dinner. You walk through. There's a scent that has been made to represent what dinner is. So you walk through this little room as you come out of a very bright and airy lobby, and then you walk into a very dark room. You kind of get desensitized, and then the sliding door opens and you walk into dinner. You've got a stunning wine cellar on the left hand side, which I think we have about 1,200 labels and about 6,000 bottles, which is really incredible. We have a very large pineapple in the restaurant, 2-meter high pineapple, which links into one of the iconic desserts that we serve, the tipsy cake, which I've eaten far too many of those in the last 12 years, and is really not good for the waistline. But for me, it's comfort food is absolute best. And then that pineapple has a very intricate mechanism of cogs kind of going around. So Heston has a real fascination with time and motion. So the cogs are going around. So he wanted people to come into the restaurant, have an idea that time is passing by, but not be too much on their phones and looking at their watches. He wants them to get immersed in the experience. So this pineapple, huge pineapple, which was designed by Seymour Powell in the UK, which Heston has worked with for the last, I think, 18 years. He's done lots of work for the Fat Duck Sweet Shop trolley and the ice cream, Liquid Nitrogen ice cream trolley as well. So that is pretty iconic to when you walk in the restaurant, and it powers. There's a shaft that runs the length of the restaurant. It powers the pineapples on our spit roast, which is a real focal point. You look through the show kitchen, you look at the pineapples roasting. They're basted for about 4.5 hours with a smoked caramel, and then they get served with the tipsy cake. We have the show kitchen, which is we have a stunning kitchen. It's a beautiful kitchen, and then we have a very beautiful dining room with a view of the skyline of the marina, which in the daytime is beautiful, and in the nighttime it just lights up, and
wow.
you see across the Palm. So it's very beautiful. We feel very privileged and very honoured that we have a stunning restaurant within an iconic hotel, which is just incredible. It's as I say, we feel so privileged to be part of this right now in Dubai. Well, Dubai is evolving and changing, which I know you're very aware of the changes, more so than myself.
So look, the one thing I was particularly interested in is that you've obviously led and trained brigades in the UK.
Yep.
And then here. What would you say has been your biggest challenge transferring from obviously the UK? You've spent a considerable amount of time there, learning as well as being a leader, to then coming to the Middle East. What would you say has been the biggest challenge?
I would say, I'd say the biggest challenge probably would be, and challenge is a positive as well. Dubai is very multicultural. I think we have 18 different nationalities in our brigade, which I'm really proud of. When we were interviewing the team, we spent lots of time interviewing and talking to different candidates. and those candidates didn't necessarily need to have Michelin experience to get the job. It was about connecting with them, and I think if they've got the right attitude, the right mindset and mentality, and we'd have a series of questions that we'd ask them, and if they answer them in a certain way, and to provoke other questions as well. With the team as a leader, I don't just want to know about what they do in work. I want to know about what they do away from work. What they do on their days off and how they're connected with their family and friends. And I think it ties into how they are as people and kind of get the idea of how they will operate in the kitchen. So I think with it being so multicultural, I think learning not how you want to be treated, but how others want to be treated. I think that's really important. And everyone has a different story of why they're doing what they do. And I think it's kind of tapping into that, and everyone needs a different approach of management, which that's down to us as leaders to kind of find out what that is. and having that family feel within our team and the front of house team as well. John and I, we have a great deal of cohesiveness. We have a lot of fun, but we're very serious. I think it's just getting that team feeling and that everyone is there for a different reason, but we're all connected through food and what we're doing. So I'd say that's been not tricky, but it's been good it's been quite refreshing as well to learn. I learn from everyone, and everyone, we all learn from each other. But also I think at a time where I think with Dubai, I think a lot of people are here for quite a short period of time. So I think it's trying to get the best out of people in that time frame, and hopefully, making them feel that they want to be here for longer than maybe they planned in the beginning. And that only happens by getting that cohesive feeling, that family. We're looking out for each other. We've got each other's backs, and hopefully, they want to stick around for a long time and to be part of what we're doing. So, I would say that's probably been the most tricky thing.
You're not the first one to say that.
Yeah.
It's about getting those nationalities all under one umbrella and moving forward towards one goal.
Yeah, and I think this time as well, I think our industry is changing slightly, and it's changing for the better. People don't want to. I think probably if we look back on it, back in our day, working 18 hours a day, we did it, and we're so dedicated and committed to doing that, and we didn't really think about it too much. We just did it.
Yeah.
But I think people don't want to work 16 hours to 18 hours a day, and I think that's a good thing. I think I think the balance of life. I think it's not all about working. I think it's about working hard, working smart, being efficient, and I think having a balance in life and spending time with family and friends and traveling and doing nice things. So I think it's a good thing that people aren't wanting to work those long hours under the pressure and the stress, but it also puts pressure on us as operators and business models. Because I think there's a set price that people will come and pay for an experience, and obviously, if you could have two teams, that would be great, but that's not the reality. So it's about trying to be efficient, trying to be clever, and trying to change the industry as well, but do it in a good way. So yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing.
No, absolutely. And as you quite rightly mentioned, in the UK now there are several Michelin-starred restaurants and varied establishments that are now going to 4 days a week.
Yeah,
which is fantastic.
We were doing that. We were doing that probably 10 years ago.
Yeah,
3 days off.
It's a huge difference.
And I remember in one of the chefs' meeting, we had a meeting. Right, we can work. You can do five days and have 2 days off. Those 5 days can be 5, 10, 12-hour days, or we can come in and we can do 16 hours, but you can get 3 days off. And I remember it was unanimous, the team. So we were, in London, it was slightly different in here because we're just open for dinner, but in London it was lunch and dinner. And to get that continuity, you kind of need the same team for lunch and dinner, and we tried getting different. We tried everything. But yeah, it's you have 1 day sleep and you've got 2 days to enjoy
whatever you
yourself,
want.
and yeah, that's it. So yeah, it's really hard. It's not easy. It's really not easy.
But it's changing for the better.
It is changing, absolutely, and it needs to change.
Yeah.
It absolutely needs to change. But I think there's a bigger thing that needs to change. But what that is, I don't think.
We'll get there.
We will get there. Keep pushing. Small
Tom,
changes.
now, as you know, you're on a chef, a foodie podcast, and we've come to the quick fire questions.
Okay.
All right. So, first question is, what's the meal that changed your life?
Do you know what? I think I would have to say when I ate at the Fat Duck. I think I'd been working at the Fat Duck for a couple of months, and I got a night off, and I was able to go and eat, and it blew my mind. 'Cause I think I'd struggled with the change from going from a very small restaurant to obviously the Fat Duck, and it was pretty touch and go a couple of times whether I was going to make it. And I remember sitting there with my girlfriend, wife now, and I remember I'd never experienced anything like that before, and it blew my mind. The flavors, the theatre side of it, the authenticity, and just that I'd never tasted food like that. So I'd say Fat Duck.
Okay. Top 3 culinary heroes.
Top 3 culinary heroes. I have to say Heston.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, from his story of, just coming from nowhere and just a vision and questioning everything, being relentless, not complying to what everyone else is doing and pushing the boundaries. And I have to say Heston. I have obviously a very personal relationship with him and a very professional relationship as well. So he has a real place in my heart.
And the other 2?
I would say, I think Thomas Keller. At that time,
Legend.
I think,
Legend.
absolutely, yeah. And I've never eaten. Actually, I have eaten in per se. When I got engaged. Sorry, I'm thinking French Laundry. I ate in per se the day I got engaged to my wife. We ate in per se, and it was phenomenal. So Thomas Keller, and I think just for how he conducts himself and how his organisation and his food and his flavours.
And your last
third one
doesn't need to be a chef.
Do you know what? If it doesn't need to be a chef, I'd probably say my mum then. Mum, and I know that's a really cliche answer, but when I look back and what we were talking about earlier, how she brought us up, and my dad. My dad was busy working and growing vegetables, but I'd say my mum. She's amazing, and her home cooking is. I was back in the UK last week, and she cooked for the family, and it was amazing.
Amazing.
No, can't get better than mum's cooking.
Now, with this one, again, a lot of the chefs, they don't mention names, and you can keep it anonymous.
A bit nervous about this one.
All right. Funniest kitchen incident.
Okay, funniest. Now, looking back on it, wasn't so funny at the time. I remember it was at the Fat Duck, being in the kitchen. I switched across I was on the stocks and sauce section. And I remember we were so short on space. Stocks and sauce section was set up in the Hind's Head. So
in the pub,
in the Hind's Head. They had a little bit more room than us. And I used to go and make all the stocks and sauces in a pressurized brat pan. And then I ended up making all the Hind's Head sauces as well. So it was double job, but again, consistency. So I remember we used to just call. Mobiles weren't really a thing back then. Sounding old now, and it was landline. And I remember we used to call the kitchen Hind's Head, Fat Duck, and the prep house, which is just down the road a bit. And the phone was going all day long. And I remember
so annoying.
Yeah, it was pretty. When you're trying to prep,
Yeah.
I remember we'd be in the Fat Duck trying to prep, and the phone would ring, and it would probably ring 15 times, and then one of us would have to move to pick up the phone. But I remember the phone was ringing, and someone asked for something, and they'd already started service, and it was quite annoying that I then had to send it across to the Fat Duck. So I remember I called them to kind of get them back. And I remember putting on like an old English gentleman's voice when I called the Fat Duck, and I put on. It was a name that I'd heard. I'd heard Derek, and so I'd heard Heston. I'd heard Ashley talking about a name called Derek Bulmer. So he was the old editor of the Michelin Guide in the UK. So I remember pretending to be Derek Bulmer. So I put on an old English gentleman's voice, and I remember I was kind of stringing the chef along. And I didn't say who it was, and I put the phone down, and I was like, I just tell Ashley that Derek Bulmer called for him. We put the phone down. I remember laughing, went off and busy, went back and made the sauces. And I remember about 2 days later, I remember Ashley came in and was like, Tom, you didn't call the kitchen and pretend to be Derek Bulmer. I was like, what? I remember a couple of days ago. Yeah, that was me. He was like, you're an idiot. Heston has been panicking, not knowing who called, thinking it was Derek Bulmer. Called Michelin, called Derek.
No.
Ashley was fretting, and I was like, "Oh no!" And I remember, I was only messing around. He's like, "You can't do that." Anyway, so I remember Heston walked into the Heinz head. He's like, "Tom, can I have a word?" And I remember I put my utensils down. I remember walking. I was like, "Oh no!" And he's like, "Tom," and I was like, "Heston, I think I know what this is about. Is this about calling the kitchen as Derek Bulmer?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he started to kind of started to give me a lecture. And I remember saying, Derek, Heston, can I just stop you there? I was joking around, blah, blah, blah. And I remember I told myself off to Heston. And I think he was like, oh, okay, you've just said everything I needed to say, saying, please don't do that again. I was like, no, lesson learned. But yeah, I remember pretending to be Derek Bulmer, who was the editor of the Michelin Guide. And yeah, at the time wasn't funny.
Didn't he give Marco his 3 stars?
I think he did. Yeah, he did. Yeah, and obviously Heston 3 stars. So yeah, that wasn't my finest moment, but it was pretty funny, and pretty funny now to look back on. And last time I went and stayed with Heston, not last year, the year before, and I remember talking about the story, and he kind of had his head in his hands. But yeah, so yeah, that was the Derek Bulmer.
Do you know,
story.
Let me tell you a crazy story. So. When I was about to open a restaurant in Shoreditch, in London, quite some time ago, and I had to cook for Derek and his son James.
Okay, yeah.
And they were like, and when Derek came in, and I knew Derek's history, I was just enraged of panic because I knew the guy, who he was, his entire history.
Yeah.
And he said, just cook the entire menu. And it was a la carte. He said, just cook the entire menu.
Nice and easy.
Yeah, okay. So we did it, and he just smashed through it. And the nicest thing is, he was just so incredible about his feedback and so genuine, you know. And he was such a fantastic guy, and I will never forget him. But yes, so Derek Bulmer, one of the nicest guys, and also, I think he was feared as well amongst so many chefs.
Absolutely, he was, yeah.
Because he had so much power.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that wasn't my finest moment.
But legend.
I remember another time as well. I remember in service. I remember on a Sunday. It was a Sunday. Heston was in service, and I remember he nipped out to pastry. I remember we used to swap all his spoons in the Paccheco container for forks, and we put like 1 spoon and 4 forks in there, so we'd be plating. He'd be like, "Whoever keeps swapping my spoons for forks, can you please stop it? Because I'm going to stab someone with one of them." We're like, right, okay, let's not put any more spoons. We'll do it to Ashley. When Ashley comes in, we'll do it to him, but not Heston. These are the things that get you through the day.
Yeah. I agree. Should have put a bit of Tabasco in his water or something, next time. So, your favourite cuisine?
Oh, that's a really tricky one. Do you know what? I don't actually have an answer to that. And my answer to that is depending on
the mood,
who you're with, where you are. I've just this summer I was in Thailand with my family, and the flavors in Thailand, the fruit were next level. Yeah. Bangkok, and taking my 2 daughters down to Chinatown on a tuk-tuk, and being in Chinatown was eating off sat on a rickety chair eating the most amazing food that's cooked from a health and safety nightmare. It was bonkers. My daughters had never seen anything like that in their lives. So yeah, I'm going to give a bit of a wishy-washy answer and say depending on where I am. I mean, at home I just love to eat simple, tasty, homely food. I've got a guilty pleasure of I probably shouldn't admit this, but I love McDonald's in Dubai. I go to Heston Street McDonald's quite a lot. on my way back. Keep my car.
It's all about the
Top
pickles,
to-
mate. The pickles.
It's amazing. Yeah, pickle, jailbird. I love going to the timeout market as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
That's always a really good evening.
But again, a lot of chefs, no joke, they've said McDonald's, and even in the UK, I know that some of the big Michelin star boys are rating different McDonald's in different service stations.
Do you know what? Yeah, so I would say Heston Street McDonald's in Dubai, the Fanta in Dubai as well. It's next level.
Extra sugar.
It's extra sugar, extra orange color. I joke to the team actually at work, and I say if we ever can't get the Mandarin puree for the meat fruit, we'll just use Dubai Fanta.
Love it. It's the same. It's the same color.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Everyone that comes, I take them to Heston Street
Love it.
McDonald's.
So, are you a sweet or a savory?
Ooh, again, I'm both. I'm gonna say both. At the moment, I've got a bit of a fetish for lollipops, which is really
What
weird.
type of lollipops though?
In Dubai, I don't even know what the brand are. They're organic. They're almost like a Clippo, but it's like a posh Clippo.
Right.
And I'll get in, and I had 3 the other night, which
Wow.
is really bad. And I was in the UK last week, and I stayed with my sister, and I was like, "Have you got any lollies?" And they're like, "No." So at 10:30, I was like, "Right, Vicky, my sister, jump in the car." I went down to Tesco's, and we spent £25 on Twisters,
No
on
way.
Fabs. I said, like, I've got a pregnant fetish for
Wow.
lollipops.
Good times.
And it's winter. It was frosty there, so
Yeah.
I need to get on top of that one.
Have a chat with the doctor
because
later.
that undoes all of the good work
Yeah.
that I'm trying to do in the gym.
Favorite ingredient?
Ooh, this is a tough one as well. I'm gonna say I love shiitake mushrooms. I love bergamot. So shiitake bergamot.
A lot you can do with those.
Bergamot. I remember when bergamot became available, because a lot of bergamot go to the perfume industry.
Mhm.
I think 95% go to the perfume industry. And when we were in London, a company called Natura would get them for us, like a specialized fruit and veg. And I remember using that. It was the smell and the flavor. And shiitake mushrooms, we do quite a lot with shiitake mushrooms at the restaurant. It's just so high in umami.
Yeah.
But so I'm going to say bergamot and shiitake
Okay.
mushroom. Sorry if that's a bit of a
No,
strange one.
not at all. The trickiest of all questions
Okay.
for the chefs and anyone on the show. What advice would you give to 16-year-old Tom Allen?
16-year-old Tom Allen. I would say, do you know what? I would say just do what you feel is right. I haven't had any regrets on what I've done to look back and give myself advice. I would say, follow your gut. Surround yourself by people who will allow you to progress and develop. And be a good person. Treat people with respect. I guess, do you know what? I'm in my 40s now, early 40s. I would say make sure you take care of yourself from a health point of view, and look after yourself. And I think it was Eddie Hearn, boxing promoter. I heard him say last week, actually, it was on a podcast, that to how you enter your 40s, I think will determine how you enter your 50s, your 60s, and if you're lucky enough to make it to your 70s. So I think balance and be healthy. Make sure you get enough sleep.
And lollipops.
Lollipops, and exercise, and take care of yourself. And I think balance is really important. That's what I'd say. I say make sure you take care of yourself and just be true to yourself.
And then the final question: what advice would you give for any upcoming or young chefs who want to enter into the industry?
I would say be prepared to work very hard. I would say be passionate. Again, surround yourself by good people. I think that's really important. And I think also pick the right environment for you. I think that's really important. I think our industry is changing. I think the way kitchens are run is changing. And I think to make sure that you're in the right restaurant for you. I think so many people enter this industry and maybe have a bad experience and leave the industry, which I find really sad. So I think do your homework and make sure that you you go to the right restaurant that's going to suit you, suit your character, and ask questions. I always say to the team, ask as many questions as you like. Ask the same question over and over as well, because we'd rather you ask, get it right, so not to make mistakes. But also, making mistakes is good, and I think to celebrate making mistakes in a smart way. Try not to do it too much, but learn from it and make mistakes. When you do something for the first time, you're not very good at it. So you got to practice. You got to do it over and over. Make mistakes, learn from mistakes, and continue. But so I would say all of those things.
So, to recap everything that we've just discussed: childhood memories, which I love, and Torquay, and I'm from Devon, so
Okay.
I love anything.
Whereabouts in Devon?
Exeter.
Okay.
And my dad lived in Torquay and Paignton, so I know
Yep.
I know those areas
Okay.
extremely well. Types of food growing up, early kitchen education, Lumiere, and of course then heading into the Fat Duck, the experiences you had in a 3-star, the thought, the small spaces, of course Ashley Palmer Watts and Heston, who have played and are still playing an instrumental part professionally and personally to you, which is incredible. Then Dinner by Heston in the UK, developing all those sorts of things, and the accolades that came along. And then, of course, Dubai, Atlantis the Royal, which is a phenomenal place, and everybody needs to go and check it out because it's just beautiful. Toughest parts of the job, and then your quickfire questions. So, Tom, if anybody wants to get hold of you via social media, what's the best way to do that?
So I would say Instagram is probably the best way. Instagram, just a personal message, and I try to respond to everyone that messages, and it's really hard. It may be a few days later, but I will definitely get back. And it could be a question about a job or a reservation for the restaurant. But
Okay, so I'll put all of that also in the show notes so that everybody
Fantastic.
can have a look.
Thank you.
And all that's left for me to say is a huge thank you to yourself for coming onto the show and being so candid, and really I've learned a huge deal, and I just wanted to say a massive thank you for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us, to you and your team, and it's been really lovely to sit and chat, and I really appreciate it, and hopefully look forward to bumping into you many more times.
Absolutely.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.